Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just
speaking into the void?
But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
Good morning, Crust. It's a great day to be a bread brother.
Ugh, mornings are not my jam. Or jelly.
Oh, come on. Stop loafing around.
I just woke up feeling hollow inside.
Just grab one of the new Morning Uncrustables sandwiches, like Bright-Eyed Berry or Up an Apple, filled with 12 grams of protein and tons of deliciousness. Crust, what are you eating?
It's just granola, not even yogurt.
No crust, no fuss. Uncrust your mornings.
This is an advert for Studio 1878. What is Studio 1878? Well, it's my podcast production company. And if you're in a marketing or a comms role or in leadership at a business and you'd like to think about producing your own podcasts, why don't you get in touch? Our website is 1878.studio and you can reach me at hello@1878.studio. And now on with the show. Welcome to No Question About That. This is United Inc. Finance Pod with me, Ed, and as usual, Jamie. How's it going, Jamie? Did you have a good holiday break?
Yeah, it was very good, very chilled, very relaxing. But as we are now in 2026, ready to hit it hard and try and help people understand the weird and wonderful world of football finance, particularly as it relates to United.
Yep. Well, before we came on air, we were just running through some of Ineos's financials. So the topic of today is some recent articles discussing Ineos's financial pressures. They are having a little bit of a hard time, but we'll try and put that into context. So what are the issues there, what they might be looking at in terms of debt and refinancing and some restructuring at the company. And then at the back end of the podcast, we'll get into what it might mean for United. That'll be the fun bit, a little bit of speculation, because honestly, we have absolutely no idea, I think, exactly what's going to happen there. But glad to be back at it and try and smash 2026. United got 13 victories under Ruben Amorim in 2025. Let's hope it's a bit more than one a month this year. I don't know about you. I'm not looking forward to Sunday.
I don't have much faith that I think we could get a draw with the players out, the Leeds crowd, and how much the Leeds team are going to be up for it. I can't see us getting much. Calvert-Lewin's going to be fully fit, probably, putting himself about quite heavily. And when we don't have the likes of DeLitt or Maguire there to help us out, I think it's going to be really, really tough. So for me, it's all eyes on Burnley, sadly.
Oh dear. Yes. Well, let's just see if there's a different playbook from Ruben and this one. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I've kind of sat on the fence a little bit with the formation argument. I think, look, the reality was whatever formation they picked, there was going to have to be a lot of change. Yes, of course, they don't have the money to kind of really revamp the squad into a 3-4-3. But look, I think he's shown some flexibility. He's going to need to continue to do that. I actually think also just the state of the league, so to speak, it is arguably the thing that's going to be, in our favour going forward. So, what will happen to Chelsea now that Maresca's gone? Will they be able to keep up their form, although that's been already kind of starting to dip? Can Villa continue to do what they're doing? And Newcastle and Spurs going to sort their acts out? The signs are, no, it's going to continue to be like this for everyone at the moment. And so my real hope is just string, 5 wins together. And I think for more than just on-pitch reasons, that will help us help someone cut his hair. And
exactly. Yeah.
Take a bit of the
sell
pressure
that off for chemical reprocessing by Sir Jim,
Exactly.
or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Third to 10th is the margins are very fine. It's hyper competitive this year, or you could say there's a lot of teams with flaws, which is true. When you have 6 Premier League teams in the top 13 in the Champions League Swiss group format, I think you can say it's competitive rather than bad quality. United just have not been able to get that consistency. Rather like Ineos, who that was a strained segue there, but
there was a segue. It was nice.
It was of kinds. All right, so a couple of recent articles discussing Ineos's financials. They are a highly leveraged business, very complex business as well. Trying to dig into their finances is not easy because there's more than 20 companies across the group of all sorts of different sizes and styles, and they have very different reporting as well because most of it's private and some public holding company entities as well. So, premise of the article was that with bonds maturing, Ineos and the group under some financial strain because of the cyclical nature of the chemicals market, or some, let's say, some market pressures from regulatory burdens with carbon trading, inflationary pressures, lower demand, tariffs in the US, and so on, have put Ineos under some strain. You can see that in the top lines. So some loss of revenue last year, squeezing EBITDA margins, losses at some of their businesses. And so the premise of the article said there are some US venture capital funds who are interested in taking part of that debt. So get into what that is, what that means, and then what it might mean for United. So top lines. Ineos fucked, and are they going to take us down with them?
Look, as you said, the nature of the business means that they are highly leveraged with debt, and they've used that to fund the business for relatively low cost, right? Like when they were piling up their last round of debt, like people buying their mortgages, it was, at the lowest rates it has ever been. So, some would say smart, some would say risky. And I think we're now seeing some of the kind of impacts of that. And I think one of the important things here to note is, and I think there's been a debt number banded round, which a bit like the Manchester United debt figures, which are sometimes banded around, a bit misleading. So when people talk about, £18 billion worth of debt, some of that is for projects to build new plants, new factories, effectively to produce all of the products that Ineos sell. When you kind of strip that out, and I think that's round about €4 billion at the moment, their leverage ratio is somewhere between 5.5 and 6 times their EBITDA. Now that is high, irrespective of the industry that you're in, and every industry will have pretty kind of standard benchmarks. I think no matter what industry you're in, 5.5 to 6, no way of getting around it. It is quite high. However, and we can kind of get into this in more detail, Ineos have been going through effectively a restructuring program, which is what many companies will do. And that's both reducing the cost of their existing business to try and make it run more efficiently, but also getting rid of a lot of something called non-core assets. So if when you grow and you buy lots of businesses, you'll tend to buy them in good times. As things turn bad and maybe some of those businesses aren't as good as you thought, or you couldn't extract as much money out of them as you thought you might be able to, invariably lots of businesses start to sell those off, and we've seen a spate of those. I don't have all of them off the top of my hand, so I'll probably need your help here, Ed. But they've sold the hand sanitizer business that they had, that they created during COVID. Belstaff was another one that they owned.
I think that's just because Jim liked wearing those jackets, honestly.
Exactly.
They also sold a composites business to private equity. So, you're right. They've been getting rid of some non-core stuff. I guess the risk there is that maybe they were good businesses and they shouldn't got rid of them, and they're selling this is always the case. If you deleveraging by selling assets, you could be selling off good stuff that will shrink the overall value of the company and the size of the business.
Exactly. But I think, overall, there's a lot of things happening which you would expect to see. And I think one key thing that I kind of listened to in Sir Jim's, I think it was the Times Business podcast, Ineos have been in a similar situation in the past, and they actually got bailed out is the wrong word, but Barclays, helped them restructure their debt for some humongous fees. I think nearly £1 billion worth of fees. In this Times Business podcast, which captured a lot of headlines a few months ago, Sir Jim Ratcliffe talked about their debt and there not being the same types of covenants on this debt. Now, it's very hard to scrutinise that statement to say whether it's true. But the big problem they had last time is these covenants allowed potentially these vulture funds to come in and make Ineos pay the debt back on time.
Yep.
Many people will be like, well, doesn't every bank do that? No, because, there is commercial relationships here, and banks don't necessarily want to force shuttering of businesses.
Yeah. There's a middle path, isn't there, between a total default, which I don't think anyone expects at Ineos, not with Sir Jim's background anyway. They'll do many other things before we get there, or vulture funds buying up debt at pennies on the pound because someone else wants to sell it on because the risk profile has changed. And you see that in their credit rating anyway, so there's certainly a risk of that. Because the credit rating has changed, you could get some people hit the panic button and sell off the debt, which then puts Ratcliffe and Ineos in trouble because they, as you say, they may be forced to work to the actual covenants, depending on what they are. I'm sure it's not an equity kicker. Well, it might be, but I'd be really surprised. But there's other stuff that would come before then.
Exactly. And I think, as I say, you can't scrutinise this because the contracts are not in the public domain. But you would think, given that everything that the company has said and everything that they have experienced, you would think that those sorts of covenants would not be in place. And it's something a little less onerous on the overall business that gives them the flexibility to effectively buy time until the kind of the cyclical downturn ends.
Yeah. And what is that cycle? I mean, we should place that in context. So there is a little lower demand, especially in Europe, for some of Ineos' products. Their principal product are these kind of plastic pellets that are used in extrusion machines for all sorts of products that you'd be using, from shampoo containers to industrial uses. They have some refineries. They once sold hand sanitizer, a non-core business, and so on. So, some macro lower level demand. There's also, as Sir Jim keeps complaining about, the sort of burden around carbon trading in Europe and the costs associated with that. Maybe is an issue. I don't know. The tariffs will hit some of the end products, so it will lower demand. So not consumer products, but demand from the typical businesses that buy Ineos products to then sell into the US market. They do have some US business as well. It's a small percentage of their overall footprint, I think. So that's just kind of put the company under general strain. And that cycle could work its way out, right? There's a changing in the mood on tariffs in the US because it's had quite a negative impact. But we have had 3 rate cuts by the Fed. That has a downstream impact into sort of the global economy anyway. European rates are still probably a little bit higher, I think. We'll see what the Eurozone does. The UK is a small part of the Ineos business, but what happens there as well. So I think you can kind of see an end to some of the challenging aspects to the Ineos business. So that's the macro environment. And then, what are they actually doing? Well, they're selling off some non-core assets, as we said. CapEx prioritization was very typical in CapEx-heavy businesses. What do we actually have to spend now versus over, because like an Ineos plant will last decades, right? It's like putting fiber in the ground or building cell towers or whatever, right? Once you built that asset, it's there forever until you want to mothball it, which they have actually done. So how much they want to actually spend, what's core? So project one is core, some is not. What can they mothball? And then there's operational expenses. hard to see, but I'm sure they're stripping out some stuff. I mean, you've just seen the Ratcliffe playbook at United, haven't you? So, scale that up by 10 times and then you can see where they may be trying to make savings in the core businesses as well. Maybe they want to get rid of that fancy office that they have in Knightsbridge. Very expensive, so Jim. I know you've got a house round there and your favourite pub is next door, but, scale down a bit. So what else? I've got notes here. Bit of portfolio reshaping. So, where do they actually want to prioritize? You do this all the time, right? In every business, but very important in capital businesses because you're making 10 to 15-year bets. And then we'll look at the refinancing, and they do have some bonds maturing at Ineos Quattro next year now. And so a lot of people will be looking at that and what does that actually cost and what kind of deal? And they will probably drag that out as long as possible, hoping for the external environment to improve. And so therefore they get into a better negotiating position, although there are risks associated with doing that as well.
You would, given that they're effectively financiers, right?
Yeah.
And so this, in theory, should be bread and butter for them. And that doesn't mean that it will be easy, and it doesn't mean that they will be successful in being able to refinance at lower rates. Because if the market just moves against them, that's the risk that you can't mitigate away. So look, I think the debt refinance is going to be the most interesting element of this. And I think the other thing, as we bring it towards United is, and I did see some faint whispers of could United shares be used as collateral against some of these debts, and kind of, you'd have almost like a forced repossession of United as a result of this. I don't think that is something that has been done. But typically, for US listed businesses, if such agreements have been made, there would need to be a filing to the SEC. And as far as I can tell, none of that has happened, or it's not on United's website.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Yeah, I think the impact on United is not direct to the business. It might be an Ineos portfolio company, or at least part of it, but they only have 20 and a bit % voting rights anyway. We'd see that in the SEC filings. And given the scrutiny that United are held under, I think we would have heard about it. I mean, it's more scrutinized. It's the most scrutinized part of the Ineos business. Crazy, because it's a tiny proportion in terms of, what is group sales? 50 billion euros or something? It's massive, right? And then United is a very small proportion of that, 2% of it or something like that. But highly scrutinized. We would have seen. I think the interesting impacts on United are really around Ratcliffe, Ineos pathway to getting control, which I think we can assume is what he wanted all along, given the bidding process, and we have the transcript there of what happened. He wanted to get to control. The pathway wasn't really there. The Glazers didn't want to sell, at least not in the structure that he'd proposed, and so on. And we'd made the assumption, given the terms in the sales agreement, the ROFO, the floor on the drag along, that it's just kind of the standard stuff, but just kind of gave you the indicators that Ratcliffe was interested in taking total control at some point. We don't know what mechanism, whether it'd be a full buyout or partial creeping towards majority ownership. That is where it becomes interesting, because Ineos, the last report said 2.6 billion cash on hand. They're certainly not going to use that to buy United. The financing situation is a little tighter. No tighter than it has been since 22, late 22, early 23, because, free money doesn't exist anymore, sadly. Good times and all of that. But it just makes the pathway towards purchase when Ineos are in this kind of situation, like for a non-core asset, a signal to the market of, we're going to dump 4 billion on United doesn't make a lot of sense. and you'd want to finance it. What does that look like? So standard bond leverage looks harder. Nation state sovereign wealth funds, vulture capital looks a lot easier. But what are the terms that Ratcliffe could get to do that? And what does that mean vis-a-vis the Ineos position right now? I think it's kind of interesting. It's all speculation, of course, but it does kind of signal that right now it's a little harder to buy the whole club. If the Glazers even want to sell, and that's the key aspect of all of this, a little harder than it would have been once, or a little more expensive to do it, let's say.
Totally. And look, the debt refi, and I think we've alluded to this in the past, there is some alignment in terms of the debt refinance timelines at United as well as at Ineos, right? And so, look, this is way beyond probably one, my capabilities, but two, the purview of details that I have access to publicly. But there is a way in which if United is considered somewhat core or kind of like a prized asset within the Ineos portfolio, £5 billion, it's probably about, just 5 to 10% of the overall value of Ineos. Is there a way to, restructure their debt refinancing there? And, because the reality is most of the debt that United have that's not related to transfers, well, all of that debt is literally leveraged buyout debt. So it's all to a degree paper debt. It's not a reflection on the overall business at all. So there are other ways that they can do that there. I think the one thing that we've talked about very, very consistently is that it just doesn't feel like anything's likely to happen right now. I did have in my downtime over Christmas and New Year, I did have a fleeting thought as to like, okay, so if I was Jim Ratcliffe, what would I do in this scenario? There is a lot of former players that have got links to an awful lot of capital in some way, shape or form. Not many of them actually own a football club. And so, look, this is not something that's going to be unique to Sir Jim. It could be any acquirer, any potential acquirer. How do you get those guys on board? Because I think one of the elements, whether we like it or not, or whether we agree with it or not, one of the elements that is kind of not holding us back, but making it more difficult is the media scrutiny. Mm-hmm. A way to align everyone's interest is to kind of, give them some skin in the game. Mm-hmm. And, if you look at Salford City, the only member of the class of 92 that's still a director is Gary Neville. Yeah. Who is already...
They sold off a stake there.
Yeah. And he's already quite close to Sir Jim. And clearly Sir Jim does listen to him. He's even... I would have thought he would have had a hand in Gary Neville going to Mercedes F1 team during the... Is it Abu Dhabi, the last race of the season?
Right, yeah.
So, if I was Sir Jim, that would definitely be one thing, because I think the reality is, even if, there is an increase in his stake in 2027 and not a full buyout, I don't think him or Ineos are going to be able to do it alone, right? Unless there is a significant turnaround in, the petrochemicals industry. He won't be. I don't think he'll be able to do all of it. And I don't think he'll be able to do it on his own. Now, some of that may come through the stadium, but regardless, there is the other thing. I'm going on quite a bit here, but the other thing we haven't talked about is what happens post the 3-year operating window.
Yep. I mean, it is amazing how many of these things align. So I'll get to your Red Knights version 2 in a second. Jamie's putting it together. What's your kicker on that one? Are you taking a small percentage on that deal?
Look, I'm under I was going to say I'm under so many NDAs. I'm not like that. I don't want to get the rumor mill going.
Hey, I've signed some military grade NDAs in my lifetime that you will pass this down to your great grandchildren. They will not speak about it either.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, it is interesting how both some of the larger parts of the Ineos debt leverage and the United bought two major bonds. do mature in a very similar timeline, and that 3-year window also comes into play in the 3-year timeline. I think when the deal happened with Ratcliffe, we looked at that window and we were like, okay, that makes sense, right? They couldn't get the full buyout done right now for whatever reasons. Ratcliffe didn't want to put the cash down. The Glazers weren't willing to sell, bidder both. They weren't willing to sell at that number. I think we looked at that 3-year timeline and it made sense for something to happen, ownership control change happening within that timeline. Right now, it looks a little bit harder just because of the environment in which Ineos is in. As I said, they have clearly strongly signaled to the market that they are doing capital reprioritization, operational cost cutting, selling off non-core assets, deleveraging. They are signaling that we are getting our business in a healthier position. And they keep saying this in all their comms, their IR stuff as well, in order that when they do have to refinance, they can get it at the best terms possible. And do all these things align? Ineos refinancing, Manchester United refinancing, stadium debt, right? It's not going to be the same people, but you can see where the relationships, are and which ones might be leveraged. And not that I want it, but Ratcliffe has an awful lot of sovereign wealth and sovereign relationships in the Middle East as well, given the nature of his business. So I'd also look at the it's aligned but not the same, the price per barrel of oil right now and where it is, because it's quite low, actually, and that will affect both the Ineos business and his potential partners' business and how rich they're feeling at the moment. So there's that. On the Red Knights too, I mean, of course, the richest of ex-United players out there in the market by miles is Cristiano Ronaldo, who was with Piers Morgan not long ago, bragging about how he'd become a billionaire. Well done, Cristiano. Congratulations. I always found it very strange when you're so wealthy beyond, like...
Why do you need to say
it? The difference between $1 million and $1 billion, it kind of sounds the same, right? But you put it down in actual cash, it's the difference between a room full of cash and, a row of houses full of cash. It's a massive difference. And, extraordinarily wealthy. Would he want to buy part of a football club? Who knows? Beckham, most of his wealth, or at least his paper wealth, given the price of MLS franchises right now, might be tied up in Inter Miami. He'll certainly have a lot in that, although he's got a reasonably small stake. I think it was 150 million, probably sold some of it to the Mas brothers, didn't he? Who are the majority shareholders. I don't know that Beckham has any major other revenue streams at the moment.
No.
Where he's at in terms of would he want a 1% of United symbolic? Maybe, who knows?
I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure whether he would even want to, or no, he could definitely have a stake, but whether he would want to because of the potential multi-club ownership difficulties that could throw up. I'm going to say, as and when we become better, we would potentially be in the Club World Cup, which, Inter Miami will probably be in perennially.
That would, yes. Particularly, as we saw, FIFA did kick out a couple of teams last time out. Leon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all fascinating. I don't think... I certainly saw some social media commentary, not an awful lot, because people don't tend to pay as much attention to that as on the pitch stuff for obvious reasons. A little bit of commentary around, hair on fire time. I don't see it that way. I mean, I don't know. They seem like really big numbers, of course, but in any kind of highly capitally intensive business, you do see big numbers like this, right? So thin margins, lots of capital intensity. It's fairly normal. Ineos are I guess this is good and bad for them. They are an efficient company. So that's good because they're pretty well run and they can point to the macro environment and say, that is the problem, right? It's bad because there's not a lot more to cut out, right? There's only, if you're efficient, you can't get that much more efficient, certainly on order of magnitudes. And, but it's a business that doesn't go bust, right? Because of all the capital in the ground. Basically, there's always a way to refinance it. And the problem that they will face is on downstream, few years' time, who gets the upside from the improvement in the business, right? And so if they end up refinancing through some of these venture capital funds, it will not be Ineos that takes the majority of that upside. That's where you'd be thinking long-term strategic issues rather than right now they're about to go bust. So anyway, I think, if I was a United fan, I'm worried about them on the pitch and just getting that business right and getting the next set of transfers right, which don't look like they're coming in January, sadly. They should. Jim, if you're listening, which I know you're probably not, but come on, mate. The Champions League is there. It's there for the taking. We are almost there. We're a point away from it, right? Probably. Definitely 3 points away. It's there. Take the prize.
I hear you. However, we could probably draw up about 50 examples of where that argument has been made, and then it didn't
gone wrong.
Yeah, and it had gone wrong. And
sure.
So yeah, I don't disagree. Right? We need players, higher quality players that fit. Yeah, whether it's 3-4-3, 4-2-3-1, whatever. But I do. The prudent part of me does agree with what Amorim has been saying in the press about, it needs to be long-term targets only. It's just the reality is that, my big fear is, let's say the next 2 weeks doesn't go that great, we then rush through a deal and have to pay over the odds for someone.
Mm-hmm.
Then they get injured a week later.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very believable thing that could happen.
Yeah, or they just don't perform. I mean, coming back to the longer term ownership picture, how do you think the Glazers, sat in Florida or Washington, or they're spread around, aren't they, are thinking about it? We know that 3 of them want out. I think that was always very clear. They are locked together contractually. Amazing being in a situation where you have to have a contract with your siblings, but they do.
Yeah.
Might tell you something about that family, given that they've had a few lawsuits against each other over the years. They're locked together in terms of their position, but this really, their negotiating position over the last 18 months has actually improved, right? So you've got the business in a better position, right? Less desperate. I mean, I know there's a massive amount of debt, but as you said, mostly paper. Some of it's not really debt, it's payables. Transfers don't really include that. It's just cost of doing business. The market hasn't improved in terms of competition to purchase United. I don't think, right? I mean, there's a few sports businesses in the US that have gone for more. There's a lot of interest from American investors generally, but the market for people in a £5 billion range is not many. There are some sovereign wealth funds that may be interested, in the Middle East. You can name a couple. But their negotiating position hasn't gotten worse, for sure, and it's probably improved, right? Are they desperate to sell? Doesn't look like it. So, how do you think they're thinking right now?
Well, I think you've got some family members with itchy feet, and I think you've got some family members that think, okay, we've right-sized the business in terms of the cost base for how the team was performing. If we now start to see an upturn, that 5 billion price that we set can be fully realized, if not be even higher. Like if we start to perform for I'd say at least 2 years consistently, United, I reckon, could easily get to, the financial state of United will be dramatically improved, right? And with the multiples that you're seeing the likes of Atletico going for, that was slightly lower than what United went for. So yeah, you could easily still argue a premium now. That's basically the two camps that you've got. You've got itchy feet versus we can extract more value out of it. I think they will all be annoyed that things haven't progressed quicker on the pitch. Do they want to sell, and has their negotiating position improved marginally? I don't think the market for potential buyers has improved because they're not going to lower their price, right? Unless they come into a distressed financial situation, they are not lowering their price. Yeah. And so, the one thing that I've been talking about a little over the last few months is, okay, what's the protection that both sides have, right? If the Glazers feel more emboldened that their price point that they were asking for before is realizable now, the market of buyers is only getting smaller. Then, is someone going to, because there is still a significant amount of capital that, you would potentially need to put into United to accelerate it? Because that's effectively, if you want to buy United now, the only upside is by accelerating the turnaround, right? And that needs cash, right? Yeah. So is someone out there going to do that? I don't know, because then you're talking about 7.5 billion of committed capital as a deal
with the stadium. Yeah.
Sorry, that's not
plus stadium.
I was plus stadium. So you're probably looking close to 10 billion.
Mm-hmm. That's
not. There are literally only a few funds that could even do that, and would they want to do that? I don't know. Even if things got worse. So sorry, just to round that point off. So the market of buyers is probably getting smaller. Really big deal cost to make something happen before 2027. If United gets in a worse position, no one's touching it until 3-year expiry in Feb 27. Mm-hmm. After Feb 27, and this is my personal view, does anyone think that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos and the Glazers are not going to continue to drive a hard bargain for United?
Mm-hmm. And that kind of suggests everyone's sort of in a frozen conflict for a while. And I think that's probably fair. And surely if the global macroeconomic position improved, interest rates come down a little bit, that makes the relative cost of doing a deal like this slightly smaller, increases the market size a little bit, but still it's rarefied air, isn't it? There's not too many individuals that can whip out 5 to 7 billion. Yeah. Even if mega numbers are, I suppose Elon Musk could pull it out of his arse and not even notice it right now. He claimed to be a United fan, doesn't appear to be his priority right now. No commentary on him personally or whether he'd want that at United. Ouch. So frozen conflict between the Glazers and Ratcliffe. They're all in a steady state position until a third party comes in and says, hey, I want part of this, right? And then that activates it all. Ineos trying to refinance, deleverage, sort out their core business, all of that kind of stuff that we've mentioned. And then United on the pitch, or United financially, is very much tied to the pitch. Do we get into European football or not? It's very hard to move the club forward without that, right? So and the margins between no European football and Champions League are like 6 points. That's the window right now. It's a couple of wins between 11th and 4th. And so it's really raised. That's why I'm going, hey, Sir Jim, you want to I know it's always risky buying in January and so on and so on and so on. But if it made a bit of difference on the pitch, the prize is really big. Or the other side, the downside, you can really see it, right? You can point to the underlying data and go, hey, we're improving, but it doesn't take much. And we've seen a couple of injuries here or there. And a thin squad looks, translucent, basically, doesn't it? And then United don't improve financially next year, right? They, not into any order of magnitude, right? And then it's about sell to buy, basically. And you hope you get good deals done you hope you can execute on the Højlund Rashford deals and you get some good deals for players you don't want. You lose some wages in Harry Maguire and Casemiro for sure. £500,000 a week gone there or whatever it is. And then you hope you buy really well and you can outthink the market, right? And outperform on the pitch. Neither of those things seem to be happening right now. Outthink the market, are they doing well on transfers? Sort of. Aiden Heaven's stock is really high. That was a brilliant deal. A few more of those would be great. Yeah. Patrick Dorgu's stock is, we're not sure exactly. The others need to stay bloody fit.
Yeah.
And so on. And so there's just there's a lot of risk associated with United improving, for sure. Does that change the ownership pathway? Not really. It just means that, the financial position of the club doesn't really improve until there's regular, consistent European football. And the one thing we haven't mentioned is how just competitive it is, really, because you got, Arsenal doing really well and spending money. City can spend whatever they want, whenever they want. Put aside 115 charges and all of that kind of stuff. Liverpool are in a down spell on the pitch, but they're in a pretty good position financially. Chelsea, well, Chelsea's a private equity fund that just happens to have a football club and they behave like it. It's hard to say with them. Villa outperforming, well, they continue to outperform. Newcastle would love to be able to spend, but they're hamstrung by the other 19 clubs getting together and bashing them overhead with regulations. Spurs, are they ever going to improve? They've certainly got, a good infrastructure base now to do that. So it's just hyper competitive. So 10 years ago, we were like, well, United never going to be out of the Champions League. Of course, we'll be there forever. Now there's razor-thin margins between no Europe and Champions League football.
Yeah. Or just, beat Wolves at home, beat West Ham at home, beat Everton at home.
That would help. That would help.
That's your 6 points. It's more.
Absolutely mad. If we'd got those points from those by beating those crap teams, we'd be comfortably in the Champions League places right now. And that's the madness of all of this. And it's not Ruben's fault per se, or his responsibility to deliver financial returns, but the on-the-pitch stuff really does materially affect the off-the-pitch stuff. Ed Woodward, in your holiday home, wherever you are, sipping a Mai Tai, you were so wrong, so unbelievably wrong, and you can come on our podcast and apologize for it anytime.
I mean, I'll put that invitation out on socials. We'll see.
Yeah, very good.
We'll see if he bites.
We'll get him there. Yeah,
maybe it'll be his burner account.
That's right. He's a lurker on socials. Yeah, I think that's it. What's the top line message? Ineos in a fairly difficult position, but I don't think they're about to go bust tomorrow. There's certainly pathways to improving their financial position. It is very much tied to their ability to do a deal for United over the longer piece, in the next 18 months to 2 years or so. And how they would structure it is probably, that's a better way of putting it. How they would structure a takeover if they wanted to do it is materially affected by their group performance. They could certainly do it, but whether they would in this situation is questionable. There you go, Jamie. By the time we've dropped this one, maybe United will have spent 100 million on bringing Elliot Anderson in to bolster our midfield and take us back into the Champions League.
Well, let's hope so, but maybe not for 100, maybe 80. No. But I can't see that happening, by the way.
Very good, very good. Jamie, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Till next time.
Listeners, you can catch Jamie on the Director's Inbox on Substack and Subprime Goals also on Substack. And on all the socials, catch me in the usual places, and we will see you after the Leeds game. Fingers crossed. No question about that. It's presented by me, Ed Barker, with Jamie Badjois, and produced by Studio 1878. To which point, it's my production company, and if you're in a marketing or a comms role at a company and you're interested in producing podcasts, get in touch. hello@1878.studio. Bye now.